Since he's had rave reviews, speaking engagements in most of the Fortune 500s and other organizations around the world, I figured he's just the man that we need. And so it's my pleasure to announce the psychotherapist will see you now. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Galie. Go get him, Tiger.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, L.A.M.P. It is a real thrill to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I was prospecting the other day. I pick up a phone. I finally get through to one of the executives of a larger insurance group. And I said, I understand you folks are having a big conference in August, and I was hoping you might consider me to be a speaker for the upcoming conference. I knew this guy. He says, Anthony, I wish you had called us a couple of weeks ago. We just hired a guy that does this program on how to handle rejection. So I said, dump him. He'll handle it. And if he doesn't, you didn't want to hire him anyhow. And I ended up having the guy laugh so hard he ended up hiring me. Now, the key words in that little story, believe it or not, were, I was prospecting a little while ago. I got to be honest, I haven't prospected in the last 12 to 15 years, haven't had to. I ended up attained a level of performance in my career where I was being heavily marketed by speaker bureaus. I had a staff of reps that were doing marketing, but obviously, it's a different economic environment. And I have some goals, and I'm very focused on those goals, and I realize that if I'm going to get and stay focused on the goals and actually reach them, I'm going to have to get back to basics, pick up the phone, crank up my energy level, and do some things I need to do to get to where I want to go. And I'm going to say the same thing to you. I'm going to make a distinction here this morning. I'm going to say that it's a slow economy, not a bad economy, because I think there's a huge difference between those two concepts. If you think it's a bad economy, why get out of bed? Why even try? But be honest, is there a better time in the last 30 years than right now to build a monster organization? I mean, do you see the talent that is sitting out there just waiting to be picked up? Is this not an incredible time to build yourself a huge organization? Absolutely, correct? And a lot of people will be inhibited. They'll pull themselves back. You got to watch out and make sure that you don't allow yourself to become your own worst enemy. I heard someone just a few minutes ago before I went on talking about turn MSNBC off, turn off CNN. That's financial pornography. Do not listen to those people. You got to start following the beat of your own drummer. Let's talk about leadership for just a few minutes. Who are the generally acknowledged great leaders in the past 100, 150 years? Well, Abraham Lincoln was considered a great leader. Abraham Lincoln ran for the presidency based on a simple concept: to preserve the Union. He stood at the State House in Illinois before he was elected and said, "A nation divided among itself cannot stand. We must preserve the Union." That was his focus. That was his mission. We had to go through a horrible civil war, but he preserved the United States of America. FDR got elected to end the Depression. Didn't know how he was going to do it, but he told us the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He tried 100, 150 different strategies till he found the one that worked, but he led us out of the Great Depression. Winston Churchill, when France falls, being invaded by the Germans. We had not come in the war yet. It looked like they were outnumbered. Germany's calling on them to surrender. He gets on the radio and says, never, 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 never give up. I don't know how we're going to do this. The only thing I have to promise you is blood, sweat, tears, and toil, but we're going to push Hitler and his cronies back into the sea, and they did. John Kennedy stood before the world and said, this nation is committed to putting a man on the moon and bringing him back safely within 10 years. Half the engineers on the planet said it was impossible. Those flags are still up there. Ronald Reagan stood at the Berlin Wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Preposterous. The wall's gone. What's the commonality between those great leaders? They had a vision. They weren't listening to what everybody else was telling them. They knew where they wanted to go, where they wanted to take their team, and people naturally followed. Ronald Reagan had another statement I always admired. He said, nothing sells like conviction. Do you have a vision? If I were to ask you right now, where do you see yourself and your team 5 years from today, could you answer that question clearly? Unfortunately, a lot of people can't. A lot of people say, well, these are economically uncertain times. I say, the heck with that. I say, figure out where you want to go and get there. innovate, do what it takes. You may have to work harder. You may have to do it different than you expected to do it, but it can get done. Because slow business does not mean no business. Just means you might have to find a different pathway to get to where you want to go. Vision, that vision thing they always talk about. Now, what I try to share with people is how to program themselves, how to get that vision in there. You may or may not know it, but I have an exhibition booth down there. I got to chat with quite a few of you yesterday. One individual had a very interesting thing to say. He said, you know, I've been in the business 30 years. I went through the economic slump in the 70s, the dot-com crash, the 9/11 dip. He said, I know that this is temporary. We're going to come out of this. I know it, but I have trouble feeling it. That feeling it part is your subconscious mind. That feeling it part is where that vision is. How do you get that feeling part? How do you get that information into your subconscious? There's a lot of ways you can do it. I have time this morning to share with you one. I'm in an interesting position. Travel around the country, been doing this for 28 years, meet some fascinating individuals. A lot of time I'm hired to speak at top performer conferences. A lot of times I'll see who gets the awards, who gets called up on stage as the agent of the year, the rep of the year, the manager of the year, the employee of the year. I started interviewing some of these top achievers quite a few years ago, and I'd ask them a simple question. What do you do to keep yourself motivated? Why do you think you won that award? What was interesting was the higher I went, the more successful they were, the better they were doing in business, the faster and more detailed the answer to that question came back at me. You know, in your own team, the heavy hitters, the high performers, have got that drive, have got that focus. I'll tell you what I think they're doing. I believe they're hypnotizing themselves to be a success. I know that sounds strange, but I absolutely believe they are putting themselves in a hypnotic state. They're not listening to the rest of the people telling them it can't be done. They go to the beat of their own drummer. They internalize these pictures of themselves. They visualize their goals. They go to bed at night dreaming about it. They wake up in the morning, the first thing that pops in their mind is the goal they're trying to accomplish. Throughout the day, that's a center of attention in the back of their mind. They're hypnotizing themselves. Don't let the word scare you. Say the word, people get nervous and tense. See, I happen to believe the average person in this room is already spending about 70% of their waking day in a trance anyhow. I'm just going to show you how to put it to some good use. And I'm not kidding. You really do spend about 70% of your day in a trance. You don't think that's true? Honestly. How many of you folks have ever driven right past your exit on a freeway? Missed the sign entirely? Can I see by show of hands? Think you were fully conscious when you're doing that? How many times you pull in your driveway at the end of the day, you shut off the ignition and seriously have to sit there and ask yourself, how did I get here? Which road did I just take? Was that light red when I went through it? You ever have that experience? I fly all the time as part of my profession. I routinely miss the takeoff. I'll often be reading a book and doing some paperwork, look out the window, when did we take off? Now, how do you miss a takeoff? How do you miss having your body hurtle down a runway at 200 miles an hour, thrown up in the air, and not be aware of that? Have you ever walked into your house at the end of the day and see a member of your family in a trance? One of your kids tranced out in front of a video game, or your spouse watching a TV program, and you call their name and talk to them, and they do not even hear you talking to them? You don't think trance-like behavior exists? Next time you're in your office, look at your team. I'll guarantee you, those reps or those agents out there making phone calls at any given moment, a third of them are going to be doing something like this. They stare out into space. They don't see what they're looking at. They don't hear what's going around them. They've been hypnotized. It's a very common state of mind. Some people waste it. They go into that daydream-like state and they snap out of it. They couldn't tell you what they were thinking about. They drifted. They don't even know where the time went. Some people use it. I'll bet you your heavy hitters are all using it. You walk into their office, they're locked in thought, you break them out of it, and they say, I was just trying to put this deal together, trying to figure out how to get this client to see it my way. They hypnotize themselves. A lot of people say, I don't think I could be hypnotized. It's impossible. Want to bet? 3/4 of this country was hypnotized into believing that housing prices could never fall. You don't think you could be hypnotized? You get into a style of thinking and a focus of thinking, and you tend to ignore what's going on around. You center your attention. That's not a bad thing if it's done properly. You're going to lead your team to growth. Number one, you need to know how much you're going to grow them. Number two, you're going to need to know how to grow them.